The story of the late child was something that needed to be told, and I think when you start to write about yourself, you realize how connected you are to others. And I really felt that I couldn't tell my own story without telling my mother's story. The Late Child and Other Animals is about my mother's story during World War II. She lost her husband while she was in the process of adopting a child. Because as a single mother, the courts at that time didn't think she would be able to keep my sister. She had to go to court, and again, for the first time she was fighting to keep my sister, who she'd already had for 2 years. Then 12 years later I was born and she wasn't married. So now we have another court case where she has to go and prove that she's a fit mother to keep a child. And those two parts of the story begin my life story until I'm 14, which is my childhood in Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight in the post-war years, because it was still a post-war, even in the 50s and 60s. And some good things and some less pleasant things that happened to me.
What I want to accomplish in comics is to do these kinds of stories that are actually have significant content. So to me, like an issue that's very omnipresent is women's rights or the lack of them. And in terms of doing a book like this, I would not have been able to do this book. Like, for instance, when I did 7 Miles a Second about David Wojnarowicz, our friend, I knew David very well, so I was able to give the story. I knew where he lived, I knew the whole environment, I was able to draw it very convincingly. With The Late Child, it's in England, and I actually had visited England repeatedly to Portsmouth, where Marguerite grew up. I knew her mother. I knew her older, but I was able to kind of reverse engineer her a little bit. Looking at some of the pictures that Marguerite has of her, I could kind of figure out, I knew her enough to make it convincing, and you have to be able to draw these kinds of environments very convincingly, and also, again, the acting, like draw her mother with convincing emotional responses. And one of the good things about comics is you can do this very direct emotional depiction and communicate to the reader a certain amount of conviction. If I didn't know Portsmouth, if I didn't know the parts of the south of France where Marguerite's writing about, I really wouldn't have been able to do the book as convincingly. But I had been there, so I was able to do it.
Creative person, and I really wanted to get some more concrete information behind me. I felt like I wanted to come back to school, and coming back to BMCC was my first way in. When I looked at the BMCC application process, I realized it was very easily done. They really facilitated anyone who's trying to come to college. So that was a really good place for me to begin.
I mean, we started at BMCC, and it was a very inviting atmosphere, very nice multicultural atmosphere. And I took basically courses. I didn't go for any kind of art courses. I just went for, courses involving writing, involving reading, and all the basic things like the sociology, psychology, and really trying to get a well-rounded group of information to start as a basis. The thing I did focus on as a major at BMCC was theater, because I thought as a cartoonist, a good part of the information that I'm putting into the drawings involves acting. Actually, the characters have to act convincingly.
For me, there was a lot of anxiety around education. Now, I went to art school. I had a good education in my high school, but I went to art school, and I really didn't, I was still very anxious about education. So when I came to BMCC, one of the things I will say was just this very welcoming environment that is not judgmental. And some of the writing classes that I took when I was here were some of my best recollections, my best experiences. The variety of stories that were being told, and you're sort of trying to put something on the line and tell the truth and move forward. And some of the stories were amazing. So the diversity here was just like so reassuring. One of the best things that happened, somebody who's now a great friend of mine, Peter Constantine, was teaching French, and I do speak French, but I took a class, one of the first classes, actually the first class I took when I got here, was his class on French literature, and he began teaching Descartes. And it blew my mind. I just thought, this is exactly what I wanted. This is everything I was dreaming about. This is why I wanted to come back to college. Yeah.
Well, it's true that a lot of comes out of the experience that we had here. I mean, for instance, this book, Post York, I mean, I had the ideas that led to that book gestated here at BMCC, and then I refined it by the time I was at Columbia, and I kept working on it, and then I ended up doing the book when I was able to work with my son, and he did a flexi disc that's in the back of the book. But also, you know, I was nominated for an Eisner Award, which is like the highest thing you can get in the comics field. But also, like, for instance, in the theater department, just the nature of being in the, I mean, being in here surrounded by younger people, you get so much energy from that environment. And especially like in the drama department, it was like we would all go and be kind of like being in Vietnam, these moments of absolute fear. One of the best things about BMCC is you forced everybody to take a class in public speaking, which actually, by the time you're done, you've relaxed and you're able to get in front of people and speak. Then going to the drama department, where we all would be put into the situation of having to act, or we did performances, we did the importance of being earnest. Well, then we actually all bond, you know, it's a bonding experience with your other people, and know they're friends of yours for the rest of your life, basically. And that's a wonderful thing, that I can always see these people and say, you know, we shared an experience that was extraordinary. You know?
So I'm taking a PhD in French at the CUNY Graduate Center, and which obviously studies French literature. But within that, I focused on the history of political economics and how that is perceived in literature. So I really put my focus on the 18th century, although in completing my coursework I've had to take different centuries. So I've read 5 or 6 different centuries, and the literature in general through those, which hopefully one day I'll be able to teach.
At BMCC I took my associates in theater, then I went to Columbia and took my bachelor's in fine art, because actually I had some credits still outstanding from my earlier art school. But then going to CUNY Graduate Center, I'm actually in film studies, and I'm in that because, as with the theater specializing, these things inform narrative storytelling. So I'm doing that less because I'm going to probably end up in film work, but because it's informing the writing. I mean, one of the outgrowths of doing the school, especially it started at BMCC, is that a lot of the essays that I've written, I've actually managed to publish. Most of them. For some reason, I was able to work it out with my professors that every final paper kind of was in an area of my interest, and I was able to publish them online, and I started writing quite a lot online, and then ended up now I write for Publishers Weekly, the Comics Journal, another site called The Beat. I read a lot of pieces for a site called The Hooded Utilitarian, and a lot of these were pieces that began as school papers.
My advice to young artists at BMCC is to take as many creative classes as you can, and step outside of your own medium. So if you think you're a poet, take some acting. If you're an actor, take some poetry, take some creative writing, take some literature classes, take some science classes. Step across all the boundaries, and you'll really start to find different ways of looking at what you think you're interested in the first place. So.
Yeah, it's like when you're done with your homework, go out, find your friends, and start a band. It doesn't matter if you can't play. Who cares? Just get out there and do it, you know.